And we're off.
So the third stint of our honeymoon started with us getting on the biggest ferry I have ever personally been on, really more just a floating parking garage, and we steamed out of Horseshoe Bay across to Departure Bay on Vacouver Island. This trip across the channel had some of the most amazing scenery I'd ever seen in my life. See islands that are just the tops of mountains shooting up out of the water. You could see whales breaching off in the distance. In fact, one of the captains we talked to said there were so many whales that they were sick of seeing them because it kept making them slow down and go around and putting them off schedule, and I cannot imagine having a job where you got sick of seeing whales. After departing our ferry in Departure Bay, we got some good seafood and some good rest and went hiking early the next day, and were immediately once again surprised by the lack of fucks the wildlife give in British Columbia. We found a nice little trail around Enos Lake, and this trail had a little bit of everything. A nice easy walking path to start with, and then a trail that got a little bit more challenging. It had woods, an open area, beautiful scenery. 10 out of 10 recommend. After that, we got the best seafood and the best view at the Enos Bay Cafe before heading off on our next adventure.
So we've come to a place where there's goats on the roof. Even got a little goat house on the roof. And then there they are. There's just goats hanging out on the roof. See, it's a goat on a roof. Just goats on a roof.
Goats on a roof?
The whole thing. We came here specifically to see goats on a roof.
Yes.
We did.
We drove quite a ways too, and there's goats on a roof.
Turns out the goats live on the roof of a cute little market that we went inside of and got some amazing smoked salmon.
We got salmon beef jerky.
They're weird. They're not bad. Like, they're weird though.
It is. It's not like regular beef jerky at all, but
I mean, it's salmon.
yeah, obviously.
I'm not mad about it.
I'm not either.
Interesting.
After this, we ventured off to Cathedral Grove that has some 800-year-old Douglas firs that are absolutely huge. The walk through the grove is all really nice, easy paved trails, and it's right off the highway, easy to find, although parking can be a little difficult because this is a popular attraction, but it was easy to get away from people. There's also a few areas you could walk off the beaten path and get down next to some water features. This little creek running through was a nice spot, and there's plenty of opportunities to stand next to really big trees and feel small and insignificant. Aside from the really big Douglas firs, they also had really big cedars, like this one you could even walk inside of. Their biggest tree in the grove was this one here, which they showed us is taller than the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which is not a building I've ever seen used for reference before. They also have giant Jurassic Park leaves everywhere in the park. They've got this nice little boardwalk you can walk around. Okay, I think you got the point. I had a really hard time narrowing down which footage to use for this section. Sorry. The scenery was incredible, and while the trees do pale in comparison to the sequoias, which we saw in California, and just nothing has ever been as awe-inspiring as those, this was still absolutely incredible and a must-do if you were ever on Vacouver Island. After that, we just kept going down the road a little bit further to Port Alberni, where we hit up a few breweries. We even found a Twin City Brewing, which seemed appropriate for us and had, I think, the best beer. Then we got some dinner, and on our way back, we found a freaking Toys R Us, which I have now learned is apparently still a thing in Canada, and I was very jealous. My inner child was jealous. The next day, we made our way down to Victoria and started by hiking up Mount Douglas, which was not worth it. It was a lot for very little scenery, although this little section was probably the best. That almost made it worth it, but we were wore out and needed beer, so that's what we went and got, was beer. Then we walked around Victoria a little bit more, their oldest Chinatown in Canada, and then we went and got some more beer, where we met a couple followers, which was pretty cool. And they informed us that the water taxis were a must-do, so we hopped into one of those, and it was a cute little ride. We took a little water taxi across the channel, saw other little water taxis. Apparently this is one of the busiest seaplane airports in the world, so we saw seaplanes coming and going. Although, to be fair, it seems like everywhere in BC on the coast you see seaplanes coming and going. And then we got to Fisherman's Wharf, a cute little area with a bunch of houseboats. We walked around checking all of them out. Had some cool old fishing boats, a bunch of little restaurants. We got seafood, of course, and then made our way back and got to see Victoria from the water at night with all the lights lit up, which was gorgeous. So we took one last little stroll around Victoria before heading back to the car to make the hour-and-a-half drive back to our Airbnb to catch our ferry the next morning, and the rental car wouldn't start. Thankfully, the sweetest old Pakistani man in the world was on his second day of Uber driving when we needed an Uber and accepted it without actually looking where we needed to go. And instead of kicking us out of his Uber, he asked if it was okay if he picked up his wife so she could keep him awake on the drive home. We were like, of course. And then he brought us to his house and they made us coffee and tea and fed us an entire feast. It was an amazing experience. Thanks to him, we were able to make our ferry the next morning and start the last part of our adventure. And if you want to see that, come along for part 4 next week.